On Wednesday, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill returns to the House of Commons. Among the amendments MPs have tabled is one from the Conservative MP and former Cabinet Minister Theresa Villiers. It has support from some of her Conservative colleagues, some big names, including Ian Duncan-Smith. Now, primarily concerned with abolishing housing targets alongside other measures, it's been criticised as a wrecking amendment that would try to grind as little house building as there is in this country to a halt. But just how seismic could this amendment be were it to be passed? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Robert Colvile, Director of the Centre for Policy Studies, Editor-in-Chief of CapX, and indeed Sunday Times columnist. And Robert, I read your column on Sunday, which seemed to emphasise the magnitude of this amendment. It could be really quite damaging, really bringing down the percentage of house building in this country by up to sort of 40%. How do you arrive at that figure?
So there are basically three things in this country that get houses built. One is the fact that government says to councils, this is how many houses we need according to, across the entire country. And so, here's your share. Can you develop a plan for housing, which meets that? The second thing is that councils have to identify sites within their patch that deliver a 5-year land supply or even longer. It's not just to say, yes, we will build some houses, but like, here is where we will build them. And the third thing is a thing called the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which basically means that when people put in for planning permission, we generally think it's quite a good idea to have more houses. We should probably say yes, unless there are really good reasons to say no. There are actually loads of amendments that Villiers has put down, but two in particular kill all three of those elements stone dead. They essentially make planning completely voluntary rather than compulsory. And that may sound good if you're, living in a Tory shire and you're seeing homes built on in pressure, and like you're Theresa Villiers and you think, they're building way too many towers in Barnet or what have you. But what this does is effectively make planning voluntary rather than compulsory. And a series of estimates and a series of experts who say, just by themselves, these things would cause house building to fall by between 20 and 40%, because we are so reliant on these targets to push housing through the system, because there are so many people who don't want houses built near them.
But Robert, you're a free market kind of guy. What do you say to those who say that top-down targets are Stalinist, that we shouldn't have the government telling us how many houses should be built and where, that we should leave it to the market?
But by that token, the entire planning system is Stalinist. We have a situation in which, in order to build anything anywhere in this country, you need to humbly petition the government to allow you to do a particular thing with your land. So if you're saying if you're saying top-down targets are not free market, they are Stalinist. Yes, they are. But the entire Town and Country Planning Act is Stalinist. The fact that we have a green belt is Stalinist. We have designated specific bits of the country where it's really, really hard to build anything. National parks are Stalinist. We have said these are particularly beautiful bits of the country where you can't build anything. And so you can't take out one element of that and say, haha, we've got rid of the Stalinist bit, because then you're just left with a system where the default is nothing gets built.
So, interestingly, looking at the names on this list, there are some up-and-coming Conservative MPs, as well as some of the sort of former cabinet ministers as well. What do you think the chances of this amendment getting passed, and indeed, therefore, house building really crashing down to lows that we have not seen in years?
Yeah. Well, let's be clear. House building is crashing down to lows we haven't seen in years, because the economy is falling off a cliff and interest rates are going up, and that's what makes this even more damaging. Even without this amendment, people in the industry are expecting house building to halve next year and to take a very long time to recover. So this makes that crash worse. It makes the recession worse. It makes the austerity we need worse. It costs thousands of people their jobs. The HBF, the industry body, has estimated there would be a £17 billion hit to the economy from these amendments alone. That said, I don't think depending on what Labour do, I don't think this amendment passes. But the problem is that if you get, as we've seen time and time again over the last couple of years, if you get 40, 50, 60 Tory MPs rebelling against the government on something, it forces the government to change its mind. So the danger is less that this specific amendment gets all the way through legislation, but more that it shows the government that there is an irreducible hardcore of Tory MPs who absolutely do not want any houses built, and it has to adjust planning policy to reflect that.
It's such a shame. This country was built off the back of Victorian infrastructure development, of politicians being proud of creating things in this country, of building things. And now it seems that politicians get political capital off the back of preventing things from being built. The Victorian forefathers of our politicians would be turning in their graves if they could see so many, of all parties, politicians blocking development and
There's a
growth
beautiful
in their
example,
areas.
which is Maria Miller in Basingstoke. She was saying, Basingstoke has taken, 50,000 new houses over the last 50 years. This is too much. The fact is, there wasn't a Basingstoke. Basingstoke was a tiny, tiny community, and we made it a new town. We built 50,000 houses. It's literally pulling up the drawbridge after pulling up the ladder once you've got to the top of it.
Well, we will explore this very, very closely on Wednesday when these amendments are to be tabled in front of that DLUC bill. We'll be following this one closely throughout the week. But for now, Robert Colvile, thank you for joining us here on The Briefing this morning.